A24 is a studio that has completely taken over Hollywood with their budget filmmaking that focuses on powerful stories and deeply personal themes. The question is, how can indie filmmakers like me and you that don't have access to big budgets capture the same essence that studios like A24 does? Well, my team and I have been in production for the last few months with a very ambitious short film project, and a big inspiration to this project was a lot of different A24 films. You know, we wanted to have a strong and powerful meaning. The focus needs to be on storytelling, acting, and getting the absolute most out of your cinematography under whatever budget constraints or circumstances that you have. And to do this, we really paid attention to what A24 films really do well. And in this video, we're gonna take a deep dive into concept creation, some of my pre-production process and planning, directing tips, and most importantly, how you guys can get started making an A24 style film. In my opinion, everything starts with an idea. A24 films are unique because they explore complex, often challenging themes, whether it's grief in films like Hereditary, personal growth in Lady Bird, or the eerie unknown in films like The Witch. In my film, The Divide, we explore the division of yourself, the people around you, the relationships you're in, and the outside world, and how you could bridge that gap to find your true self. And I think that that's one thing that you guys really have to think about, is that when you are creating this film project, what is the core idea? You know, you got to think about the theme that resonates deeply with you. What do I want my audience to feel? You know, what questions do I want them to consider? Now, when I am creating my concept or my idea for my film, is I ask myself three things. Number one, I choose a core theme and I try to figure out, you know, what is the identity of the film? What is the internal conflict that we want to explore in this story? And then what is the personal or universal human experience that you could bring to the story? What is something that not only resonates with you, but that would resonate with people all over the world? What are the things that people go through on a daily basis? Then the last thing that I like to do is I write just 3 basic keywords for my story. You know, what is the mood of your film? You know, the 3 basic keywords that we wrote down for this film is internal conflict, surrealistic, and exploring deep human emotions like depression, isolation, self-worth. All of these things that I believe are something that everybody kind of goes through on a daily basis at some capacity. And I think that it's important to at least have this in your mind and at least have this down on paper. The truth is that if we don't think about the root and the cause before we get started, we're gonna feel lost along the way. Now, the second that I have my idea down and I start to build out a script and something that I'm kind of happy with the story, I then start to figure out what is my ideal budget for this project. What could I afford, or how can I raise money to actually fund this project? Now, you don't need a ton of money to go out and make something great. I see filmmakers all the time that have very cheap gear and go out and tell great stories. So don't feel restricted by the amount of money that you have. However, you do need to set aside your budget, and what that's going to tell you is how big or how small your production is going to be, and that will also tell you what is the box that you're living in. You know, one thing that our DP Sherman always says is, let me figure out what the constraints are and let me figure out what the idea is, and then we'll go from there and we'll try to figure out how to get the best picture possible off of what those constraints are. Figuring out the budget will tell you how many shooting days that you could have. It'll also tell you how many crew members you could have. And even if you have a $0 budget and it's all about the time that you could put in, well, you also have to evaluate how much time can you actually put into this project. Now, once I define my budget, the next thing that I do is I take a deep dive into pre-production. And one app that I use to handle all my pre-production needs is something called Milanote. Milanote is incredible for so many reasons, but one thing that it allows me to do is have one solid place where I can not only have all of my pre-production needs and all my ideas in one place, but I could also collaborate with all of my team members. I create everything from storyboards, shot lists, call sheets, mood boards, everything that you could possibly think of, and I have it all in one place that I share with my team and we all collaborate on. Now, when I am in pre-production, the first place that I start is I start to create a mood board. I don't know about you guys, but I like to start with music because I feel like music is such a great way to start building the world of, you know, your film. Now, what's great about Milanote is that you can easily drop playlist or music into your mood board, and you could actually listen to it while you're creating the mood board, and other people from your team can listen to the music watch the mood board, and boom, you have your world kind of created. And then from music, I go into creating the visual aesthetic for my film. And that might be looking at a bunch of different cinematography and a bunch of different movies, and I try to figure out like, what does the world look like? Now, in my film, The Divide, it's a very contrasting film where you have really saturated, surrealistic cinematography where we have to create these crazy worlds for our production. Then you have something on the other end of the spectrum, which is really grounded in real life. I want the audience to understand and know, or at least kind of feel, when you're coming in and out of the real world. Now, after I create my mood board and I start to have a good understanding of what the creative direction is for the film and the cinematography, I then began to storyboard my script. Now, if we take a look at this scene from my film, this was supposed to be an argument scene between me and my co-star Isabella, and the way I decided to break this out is into 3 sections for this scene. And that's just because there's 3 different locations while this argument scene kind of evolves and takes place. And what's great about Milano is that you can easily create this just by grabbing a column, dropping it in here, naming it whatever it is that you want. You could add these little notes on the bottom of your picture, and what I like to do is I like to put the script as a note under each picture. That way, as you're looking and as you're reading, you can kind of follow along with the script and the corresponding image and the idea that I have. And this is so important because this allows my DP and the rest of my crew, my producer, everybody to be on the same page. And as someone who's directing and also starring in this film, it is very, very important that I have a really good understanding of what the shots look like, what the composition is, and then how, the blocking looks with the script right there. And again, just being able to have this storyboard and all your pre-production materials in one easy format that you could quickly go through and show your entire team, to me, is priceless. And this is really the workflow that I have for every scene. I like to go scene by scene, and I break out a storyboard for that particular scene. I think when you break it out into sections and you take it by scene and then you break those scenes out into sections of a storyboard, in my opinion, it just makes for a much more organized workflow and easier for my whole team to understand. One thing that I think that is very important is creating something called a character sheet or a character card. I don't know if everybody does this, but I think that it's pretty important to build out what this character looks like. And what I like to do is I like to give them backstory and I like to give them motivation. And I think that that's so important because as somebody that's also a director and an actor, I think that it's important to understand who this character is, where they come from, and why they act the way they act. And that could really lend to the overall performance, because puts the actor into the character's shoes. Do they come from a rich home? Do they come from a good family? How did they grow up? Do they play sports? What kind of characteristics do they have? Are they an angry person? Are they a happy person? Are they a depressed person? Like, all of these things create this character. Now, if we take a look right here, you could see we created a character sheet for Jenny. Now, Jenny has a character arc where she starts off with these emotions and these kind of characteristics and becoming this different kind of character. It's not something that you have to do, but I think giving as much as you possibly could to an actor to work with is always going to benefit you. Milanote is available for free with no time limit. Sign up using the link in the description and start your next creative project. A24 films a lot of the times have lighting that is very grounded in reality. Now, if we take a look at my film, The Divide, there are moments where there is, this grounded in real life kind of cinematography where we use minimal lighting and we utilize as much natural light as possible when we are shooting things that are supposed to be grounded in the real world. And the idea here is to have a little bit less saturation, but a little bit higher of a contrast. But if we take a look at some of these shots that are supposed to interpret what happens within the mind, well then there you start to have more saturated and vibrant colors. And this was a very purposeful choice because, creatively we wanted to give a different feeling. Like I said in the beginning, we wanted to have this divide between reality and the subconscious. I think that it's very important as a filmmaker or a director or a cinematographer to give yourself these rules for your film. Creating rules for cinematography and rules for your storytelling and lens choice is only going to help you guys because it's going to lend to the viewer what's kind of going on visually. What story are you not only saying with the dialogue, but what story are you telling through the lens. Now, speaking of the lens, another very important factor for the cinematography is lens choice. For such a long time, I would always use a 50 or an 85 millimeter on everything because I always thought to myself, like, it's got really pretty bokeh and it looks really nice and compressed, and yeah, all of that's great, but the truth is that I learned so much from our really talented DP on the project. His name's Sherman Johnson, who we are creating a course with, more on that later, but he has really shed so much light on lens choice and why he chooses certain lenses. And more often than not, I noticed that we're using a lens somewhere in the area of 24 to 35 millimeters because what that does is really bring the viewer into the shot, and it makes you feel like you're right there and you're present in the moment, and it brings a certain realism to what it is that you're watching. And that's something that we spoke about so many times as we were having our meetings and talking about shooting different scenes. It was like I wanted to have the audience feel almost uncomfortably close to some of the characters in the story. And shooting something on a 24 or a 35 millimeter is going to give you that feeling. Now, some of the rules that we created for lens choice is we decided to use anamorphic lenses only when we were talking about a past memory or something that felt very dreamlike. And the reason why we chose anamorphic is because they have these otherworldly kind of qualities. They have these really nice lens flares and this oval bokeh look, and it just looks different from spherical. And when we are in real life, or when we are in a moment where we want the audience to feel like they're in this space, that's when we decided to use spherical lenses. From an artistic standpoint, we decided to mix and match the two because we felt like that would lend to the overall story. Not just because, oh, anamorphic is really pretty to shoot on, more because anamorphic helps us tell that story. And that's what I want you guys to really think about as you guys are crafting your cinematography or your looks for your films, is really think about what the story is called for. One major component to filmmaking is sound and music. And I wouldn't say that all A24 films sound the same, because that would be impossible. A24 is a studio, they're not a director, they're not a producer, but they do greenlight projects that just have a certain sound and a certain feel to them. And what I've noticed, if you really pay attention, is that they don't use big, crazy orchestral pieces. If you really start to pay attention, they use a lot of atmospheric tones, and they use a lot of things that can make you kind of give a feeling without necessarily having a iconic kind of film score. Composers that use synthesizers, or if they are going to use orchestral components, they're using kind of a small intimate orchestra. They kind of create this bed of atmosphere that I think needs to be thought out when you guys are in the process of creating the overall idea for your film and creating the world for your film. You know, is this using organic instruments? Is this more, you know, an electronic kind of theme? What is the sound of my movie? Finally, we have editing. And this is one of the most important aspects by far when it comes to creating that A24 feeling and the look of your films. One thing to consider when you are watching these films, and if you really pay attention to the editing, is that they're not doing a lot of quick cuts. They're slow burn. They let long takes go. They give dramatic pauses. They allow things to kind of unfold, and they allow for character development. Rather than cutting really fast, some of these action movies that are big blockbuster films that need to kind of keep your attention, which are really going based off of eye candy and explosions and, you know, all of these different things, which, don't get me wrong, is a style of filmmaking. But if you're looking for that A24 look, you pause, you give yourself time, you give your characters a moment in the frame, and you slowly push in, or you just let a take play out a little longer, and you let the actor finish their dialogue and hold on their face. You know, if I'm gonna give you guys a quick directing tip, the way that you have to direct if you want that style and you want that theme is stay in character, stay in the moment, be there, be present, and do not let yourself get out of it until we cut and say roll again. Because going back to the beginning of what makes an A24 film, they are really focused on the performances of actors and really tuned into the dialogue and what they're saying and how they're feeling and their expressions and just the deep complexity of whatever emotion that they're conveying. If you are trying to edit something like this, resist the urge to cut too quickly and really think about, is the audience getting to feel this character? Are they getting to know this character? And if you guys want to learn more about filmmaking, me and my team have been building a course throughout the entire process of making this film. And I'm extremely excited about this course because we're going to break down every aspect of this film and how we started it from, the concept and the script writing all the way through to, production and the cinematography and the complex lighting breakdowns into post-production. So if you're an indie filmmaker with a strong passion to create films and you have a story that you want to get out, you guys can sign up for the email list and be first to be notified as soon as this course drops. I want to thank you guys so much for stopping in, hanging out, talking about A24 films and my film and just my overall experience. Thank you guys so much, man. And I'll see you guys next week.